Welcome to A Drop of Silence, the groundbreaking podcast series that dives deep into the realms of controversy. Join us as we bring special guests who share their extraordinary experiences and offer unparalleled insight into history, today's news headlines, and the future. Get ready to embark on a thought-provoking journey where silence speaks volumes and the truth lies somewhere beneath the surface.
What time will it be when war is no more? When bullets are melted and the warships moor.
Shalom. This week I am interviewing Mr. Joel Marcovitch. I have known Joel for about 20 years now, which is hard to believe. He has been the head of Hillel and the University of Michigan. He has been executive director to many Jewish organizations and community centers, and he's a very brilliant man. He's great insight into things, and he's highly respected in the United States and other parts of the world, to the point when Bibi Netanyahu came to the capital of Washington to talk to Congress. He was one of the people that was in the audience. He was asked to please be there for commentary afterwards. And Joel has a very specific way of looking at anti-Semitism. I hope you enjoy it. With me today is Joel Marcovitch. With a strong commitment to making the world a better place, Joel Marcovitch has always combined his business acumen with a deep sense of purpose to create innovative solutions and inspire others to push boundaries and create a better future. Beyond his entrepreneurial mindset, he is actively involved in philanthropic initiatives, championing causes related to education, diversity, equity and inclusion, sustainability, and social justice. And Joel, you have just started a new company. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so after 20 years working in the nonprofit space, doing everything from programming to running, huge annual campaigns and managing multi-million-dollar endowments, I've decided to start my own nonprofit consultancy firm. So it's called Bexford Consulting. That's BEXFORD Consulting. You will look at us on the internet, bexfordconsulting.com. Where I'm helping my clients, everyone from, doesn't matter what nonprofit there are, people who are looking for strategic management, help with fundraising, help with just idea sharing, how to make their nonprofit sustainable, rather than just keep going year after year after year, how to grow, manage and understand, as well as for donors. Some people who want to give a wonderful gift to a cause, but they don't know who to give a cause, what cause there is, and if there's multiple people in that same cause, how do I know my money is going to be used further in this one? Well, they hire someone like me, and I'll be able to deep dive into those organizations and say which one is the best one for you to put your resources to. Like, you're going to go and look for a refrigerator, right? You don't know which refrigerator there is, right? They all cool your food, they all freeze your food, right? Maybe make some ice. But in the philanthropy world, there's millions of organizations doing like the same thing. But how do you know which one your money is going to go further with? And so you hire somebody like me who helps you, in your philanthropic endeavors, as well as second generation philanthropy, how to invest, how to do your endowments, donor advice funds, things like that.
And after COVID, you're a desperately needed man for many organizations, I'm afraid.
Cool. I mean, I raised $1.66 million in part of my organization on top of our $6 million annual campaign in order to meet the needs of my community.
Wow.
COVID was a very, very tough time for a lot of nonprofits. So I'm happy to help in any way I can.
That's wonderful. That's an amazing thing. The last time you were on the show, we talked about the 6 different kinds of anti-Semitism. And we brought up people like Kenya West. There is this major influx, like Whoopi Goldberg. She got up and said, what was it she said? She said, well, they're all white, that I don't care about those people. And meanwhile, over 40% of the Jewish population of the world is Black. And then you have, who's the other one though? Mel Gibson. He went on his little anti-Semitic tirade. What is going on with that? Like, why do people suddenly feel they can say these horrible, nasty things?
It's a great. I think it comes. I mean, like, I think all hate comes from ignorance a lot of the time. I mean, maybe something happened to you by somebody, but again, we went through our anti-Semitic, the 6 anti-Semitic virus mutations, right, that are coming out in the world. So if one person who's Jewish wronged you, then all Jews are, are lumped into that kind of negativity view that you have of Jews. What I would say from the Whoopi Goldberg incident is very interesting. There is, within the Black community, just a thought process, especially if you haven't really met many Jews, that all Jews are white. Mm-hmm. And therefore, there's no understanding that they're actually Black Jews. And if you have a look, and I'm going to correct your statistic, I believe, that 60% of the world's Jewish population would qualify as people of color.
Yeah.
And I've been to Ethiopia, Jewish Ethiopian absorption centers in Israel. I've spent a lot of time with the Yemenite community as well, and Jews of African origin, right, and Persian or origin, who I find I have much more in common, with them than I do necessarily with some of the folks who are white who I met in Georgia, yeah. Right? Yeah. When I lived down in Athens, Georgia. I mean, and I think what some people in the Black community don't understand is there are Jews of color, and they're counted as Jews. Right, mm-hmm. We sing the same songs that we went to Sunday school with and Hebrew school. We understand the same prayer, right? There's a uniformity around the Torah, the festivals, the things, the foods. Even though I think that Moroccan Jewish food and Yemenite Jewish food is far better. Sephardic food is far better than Ashkenazi food.
Oh yeah, I agree.
But what I would say is that people like Whoopi Goldberg just see what's in front of them. And they don't have a desire to look holistically at a people or a situation, and therefore comment from ignorance. I think Kanye as well, we spoke about this, a few of his folks around him who who felt he got screwed by are Jewish, and so therefore all Jews are bad, and and just want to screw him out of business. I mean, I don't like his shoes. I have no desire to wear those things on my feet, right? Even though people say they're cool. I think they look like alien shoes, but I am not in any way affecting his business or it should affect his way that he feels about all Jews, right? And put everything in the same kind of category. So we're seeing statements come out from people from ignorance. But I will tell you that I have a rule to know whether something is anti-Semitic or not. And it's about the intent. Like, if you intended to offend me, then I am offended. If you said something from ignorance, I don't necessarily think it's anti-Semitic. Right. Because once that is actually pointed out to you, say, oh, by the way, Whoopi, what you said is very insensitive, and here's why it would be perceived as anti-Semitic. I want you to be armed with that knowledge. What you ever want to do with that knowledge, if you want to apologize or whatever, it's up to you. But now no one could turn around and say you haven't been told why what you said is very controversial and would be deemed by majority of Jews to be anti-Semitic. And so therefore you need to educate yourself, right? And you've been educated. And so therefore, if that person's reaction to that is, well, I don't care, I said what I said, free country, whatever, then all right, you treat them like that way. If they apologize and said, listen, I was ignorant, I didn't know, I'm sorry, then I don't think that was anti-Semitic, right? So it's about the person's intent and where it came from. I've had hundreds of conversations with people, especially when I lived in the South, who would assume that all Jews did X, Y, and Z, or Jew them down on a bargain, right, or a deal. I look you down on this kind of thing, and I would say that's actually a problematic sentence. And they would say, I didn't know it was, I didn't know it was, but my grandfather used to tell it, tell me, right? I don't think these people are anti-Semitic. And I think it behooves the Jewish community, especially the folks around the ADL, to basically say, we know what an anti-Semite looks like, and we know what ignorance looks like. And once we educate people who are ignorant on this matter, their reaction to that will basically tell us whether or not they fall into the category of anti-Semite or fall into the category of wanting to make the world a better place. And so therefore that is my philosophy. And I think that we've seen a little bit of both, right? So Whoopi was told a number of times that she's flirting with this idea about Jews, X, Y, and Z, and she's crossed the line, come back, cross the line, come back and apologize. But with Kanye, he's all the way out there. Mel Gibson, I was devastated. I love watching Lethal Weapon.
Yes.
I'm a big fan of Mel. He said something in a stupid, drunken state where he was hurt and he lumped all Jews in the world. Do I believe he should have been exiled from Hollywood? No, because we've all done stupid stuff. Right, and we should all have a chance of redemption, and that's basically what America or Western society is, right? That if you make a mistake, you should have an opportunity. Again, what is the intent of the person after they made a mistake, in order then to show, look, I'm not this type of person. I said something ignorant, and here's the work I'm doing on myself. We're not all above reproach, right? We've all done something that's silly or whatever. We've asked for forgiveness, and so therefore, I think people like Mel Gibson, who seems he had genuine remorse, from what I've seen, and I haven't seen a story about Mel in a while, but should be able to have a livelihood and not be cancelled because they said something from ignorance or from a place of pain. And I think that we as Jews need to be a lot more forgiving for those folks, because we have enough to deal with the people who are really, really anti-Semitic. Yeah. We need people like Mel, and we're going to need people like Whoopi, on our side, in the future, to say, they showed me grace and compassion and kindness, and that is very, very rare. And I'm going to stand up for my Jewish friends.
Yeah. I think with Whoopi, what made it so disheartening for me to hear that, first of all, she took on a Jewish name because she thought it fit better with Whoopi, so she would have that kind of a stage name. Second is she always talks about Martin Luther King Jr. and his marches to freedom and everything. And the people crossing the bridge with Martin Luther King, the person standing next to him was a rabbi. It was, and I know a lot of Jews who were marching on Selma. They were some of my patients, and I'm sitting here thinking, how can you be so like, I don't understand her mindset. We've always been there. In fact, it was two Jews who started the NAACP. And because they were fighting for Black rights. And I'm sitting here thinking, you don't know your own history, girl, for you to turn around and say something like that.
Well, I would caution, Pam, I would be very cautious of the same kind of logic, because the majority of Jews in America don't know Jewish history, right? I don't.
Yes.
I think it's Jewish memory. But anyway, we can that could be a third podcast that we do together. Jewish memory. But I've met many young Jews who don't know when the State of Israel was founded. Was it in 1948, 1950, 1983 kind of thing? I mean, I think people are ignorant about their own past, because there's so much happens in people's lives that people don't remember, who was where and what year was what, and that's fine. But I think it's the essence of the story, right? The essence of the story that Jews and Blacks stood together in the height of the civil rights movement, that has been lost over time.
Yeah.
And I think that if you have a look, and I've actually done some work in the Black community with an initiative that I have called the Equity Collective. It's on my website, bexwoodconsulting.com, where bringing the Black and Jewish communities together to understand how we as two communities came together for the civil rights movement and around that area, but yet we went different ways. We kind of like split, and why that split, and how we need to come back together. In fact, on Thursday, I'm taking a group of African Americans and Jews on a 3-day bus tour. We're going to DC, and we're going to go to the Holocaust Museum and the African American Museum. And we're going to sit on the bus for 3 days, and it's Jews and members of the Black community, and we're going to talk about like our families and our lives, and about us, and about we're going to learn from each other and hear each other's stories, and talk about how do we come together in Columbus in order to make Columbus a better, a more perfect city than it already is. And I'm excited, and we'll probably do that as a part of an annual tradition, and I happen to be the tour guide for the Jewish part of the community. So what I think that is that, from what you were saying, yeah, people forget their history. They really do, conveniently forget. And so when they try and invoke something, they forget necessarily where they came from. And that could be ignorance, number one, and also it could be intent. But as I said to you beforehand, I always think about that person says something ignorant. I hope someone like corrects them, or makes them understand, rather than going to full blown, fire and brimstone mode.
Yeah. What's like when I guess the group I'm most upset about is the BDS movement, and how that became so wildly successful in North America. That was created by Barghouti, a well-known terrorist whose main goal in life is to destroy Israel and Jews. And yet it's like wildfire throughout the campuses. I have trouble with that. I have real trouble with that.
Yeah, I mean, look, BDS was around when I was at Florida Atlantic University as the Hillel program associate in 2003. BDS started to kind of like move into kind of campus area. And it's very, very simple. It was, the Palestinians are oppressed. Your insert group is oppressed. And therefore, your oppression and our oppression are equal. So therefore, why don't you come and protest with us? And we'll protest with you. And therefore, we can really start, forming coalition and alliances together. And because campus, ever since I would say the 1950s and 60s, has moved progressively left in its academic and its professorships and its chairs, right? The left seems to be controlling the mind space of the next generation of people. And so therefore, if you're in a politics, and I've had, Jewish students come up to me as when I was working at a Jewish organization on campus, I would say that they cannot speak their mind in their poli-sci classes because they want to have what's perceived a pro-Israel approach, and their professor is so anti-Israel that they're worried that their grades would suffer because of putting an opposing view to the Middle East conflicts than what their professor has.
Yeah, it's exactly true.
And that is more and more prevalent in today. And I haven't been on campus in 10 years. I can only imagine the cluster it is, on campus today. So when you have folks who, bond over oppression, it becomes incredibly powerful coalition on campus. But when I said before in my other talk about anti-Semitism, you should go watch that if you haven't watched, if you're watching this first, is that if it's only surface level connection, but if you go deeper, then you realize you actually don't have anything in common. Case in point, the Palestinians and the LGBTQIA community have formed a very, very, tight bond. I mean, look at some of the marches that happened in DC, and that anyone with an Israeli flag that was a rainbow flag, as part of, Pride March, was basically told that you can't fly that flag, right, at all whatsoever, because you're Jews, you support Israel, and therefore everything. However, nobody at the leadership level of the LGBTQI community has ever said to the Palestinian leadership, of the BDS movement, well, what's it like to be gay or lesbian and trans in Gaza? Or do you have the gay people in Gaza have full rights? And if they answer truthfully, they would say, well, actually, no, because we throw them off buildings, we drag them behind cars, and we kill them on the streets if there's a rumor for them being gay.
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, in the society that we have is very, very surface level. So oppress, we must be together and let's fight and get the coalition, right? Which makes BDS stronger, right? Again, with the left-wing folks on campus and all of the students who seem to be, wanting, massive amounts of change and social justice, and think by changing their Facebook picture, they're bringing some justice into the world, a lady's color or picture or whatever. And all of a sudden that happens, that's going to stop, right? But you go 1 or 2 levels deeper, you realize you absolutely have nothing in common. And therefore you're actually going against your own interests. Yeah. If you look at more of a global picture. And that is very disturbing and distressing.
Yeah. When I had my radio show at the university, it was just, it was actually very, very frightening. And I used to have his Jewish students come into the on-air room and hide because they were afraid to be in the student center. Because there was always these protests going on. BDS was there. People trying to convert kids into being Muslim, etc. And they'd hold vigils for the terrorists who had killed people. Oh, we have to hold a vigil for them because they're now in heaven. And when I had my radio show, I would literally walk out to about 40 or 50 Arab students who were there ready to beat the crap out of me. And I mean, being the Jewish mother I am, what I did was I would always have cookies and muffins for them and say, oh, well, let's just sit and talk. You're in Canada now. This is how we behave. We sit over tea and cookies and muffins and we talk sociably. And they had
how do they go for it?
Yeah, they had no idea what I was about.
Right, because they're not, the students of today have a zero open mind of understanding what university is supposed to be.
Yeah.
And what a westernized country is supposed to be. You're supposed to come here to these countries and bring, yes, tradition and food and things like that, but your mind is supposed to be open to new ideas. To challenge the ideas that you currently have or where you came from in order to assimilate into society that holds the values of democracy here, right? And the things that were the country that you came from that have very repressed values about democracy and repressed, values about women, in society and LGBTQIA. You're supposed to be assimilated in society in 1 or 2 generations' time, not lose your identity completely, but certainly respect the country that you came to and its laws and its values that it upholds. And unfortunately, I think we've seen in some westernized countries a failure to include or really teach new immigrants the standard of what is set in order to have democratic values, that you can practice your religion, you can support the countries you want to support, but the people who are your neighbors can support can be whatever religion they want and support whatever countries you can. And I think that we're at a point where you could probably walk across campus in any campus in America and maybe Canada with a Palestinian flag high above on a flagpole, and no one is going to say anything to you.
Oh, exactly. They wear in Windsor. They wear Palestinian keffiyehs.
I don't think anyone is going to say anything to you. But if you walk across campus with an Israeli flag of the same size from the north to the south, to the east to the west, I doubt that flag makes it across.
Yeah, it won't.
The campus. Or I doubt you don't get something thrown at you, spat at, shouted at you, or accused of killing babies or anything like that. And unfortunately, the campus community and the authorities, the provosts, the university departments, are not protecting enough its Jewish students and their viewpoint and democratic principles of freedom of speech is not applied to those who support Israel and who want to hold an Israeli flag on campus.
So now where did we go wrong and what do we have to do? Is there anything we can do to stop this virulent kind of hatred that's going around in the left-wing circles and in the universities? I feel the rest of us Jews have let these kids down majorly. And I don't know, I really can't see any way of fixing this.
Well, I think the only thing that universities listen to is money. And if you
Yeah.
have a look at the business schools, and you have a look at like who built the hospital, the university hospitals, and who built like, you know, who's big donors to universities, they're Jews. Because we believe that education and medical access should be free for all. These hospitals that Jews build and put their names on it are not just for Jews to go, they're for everybody to go.
Yeah.
I think there needs to be a galvanized, organized, community-wide stance to pressure universities not to ban kids, right, who are anti-Israel, but to put into their mind that their viewpoint is one, and there is an acceptable other viewpoint that needs to be allowed to flourish on campus and not be intimidated with words or actions. And until universities understand its code of conduct, or enforce its code of conduct, or increase its code of conduct, right, and then start kicking some of these troublemaking students out for intimidating or threatening to beat up your students that you had at university, we are not going to see change. So I'd like to see all of these Jewish donors stop giving to universities. Just stop it. Just end the giving to universities. I don't care whether or not that your name is going to be in a building or not. Putting your name on a building that fosters anti-Semitism and hate against Jews of the next generation, I believe is counterproductive to your principles of why you gave your money in the first place to that academic institution. So I think that Jewish donors should stop giving to these institutions until they protect Jewish students on campus.
And what about the professors that teach it right from their from the front of their classroom?
I have a whole issue with tenure. And it seems like tenured professors think that they can say anything or do anything in order to get away with whatever. And they're professors, right? So they are protected by the university and protected by the tenured class. And so therefore they can preach at whatever they want. And many of them need to retire and go, right? Because they are poisoning another generation, especially political science and some of the social science, about like only talking about Israel in the negative, with absolutely no commentary of how Palestinian leadership is oppressing its own citizens and has basically destroyed the Palestinian future. Because all it does, it blames Israel for the suffering of Palestinians. Now, I can say Israel has oppressed Palestinians, absolutely. But it's not the only cause of why, right? There's no conversation about Iran and funding the Palestinian Authority, funding in Gaza and the rockets and thousands. There's just no kind of balance in that kind of argument to say, look, it's both Palestinian leadership and Israeli leadership, and let's try and get them together to think about how do we make peace in the Middle East, right? And how do we get those groups together? But until you see professors and until you see academics and people in classroom saying both of these governments and organizations, whatever you want to call Hamas, terrorist organization, is at fault for oppressing the Palestinians, then we cannot even begin to have a conversation about big peace, because there's no recognition of what a terrorist organization is doing is wrong. Yeah. And we're seeing that from conversations that you see on campus, that they're called freedom fighters, right? So bombing Israeli kindergartens, through rockets and indiscriminate rocket fire into heartland of Israel, which has no military target at all whatsoever, it's considered freedom fighting. And it's just, I scratch my head and think like, wow, how far have we come from critical thinking, and how far have we come from an understanding that it's two sides, have the need to make peace, right? You can't just have one side wanting it and the other side rejecting it all the time, like the Palestinians have done for many, many years. And then until there is an understanding of that, I don't think that we'll move forward. And that goes really kind of what your conversation was about, political, right? The Democrats and Republicans that I know you want to talk about. And look, I've been in America 20 years. I have a green card. I can't vote, right? I cannot vote. So I don't have a say in any of this. I actually happen to look at politics from a neutral standpoint about what the Republicans are doing and what the Democrats are doing, and how they talk to each other and how they communicate with each other. Or I'm sorry, they don't communicate with each other. And I've been to I've been to DC, and I've lobbied on behalf of for the security the Non-Profit Security Act in order to get more money for religious institutions to have armed guards out and security because of what happened in Pittsburgh and the Tree of Life murder of 11 congregants by an anti-Semite. And I will tell you that there is a problem the Jewish community has in recognizing zero achievement on either side for its purpose. What I mean by that, example, the Abraham Accords that Trump did, right? I think were incredibly amazing for Israel and will be amazing for the Jewish people, right? Throughout like that region. I think it's unbelievable. But because Trump did it, anything that Trump does is terrible. So therefore, we cannot. I'm an anti-Trumper no matter what he does, and therefore I can't do it, right? So on that side, it's terrible. And on the other side, even though Obama, I think at the end, with opting to not use the veto for condemnation against Israel at the UN, I think it was the last week of his presidency.
Resolution 2334.
Right. Still signed the largest foreign aid package to Israel in American history. And so therefore there was no kind of like, all right, so he did this, but yet if you have a look at Tuckless, right, if you have a look at the real stuff, Israel is benefiting from the largest, military aid package in America's history, right? And there's an inability for those who are Republican Jews, right, in order to thank President Obama, for doing that because of what happened on the resolution and some other stuff that Obama's problem with Netanyahu and Netanyahu coming to the a joint meeting of the Congress and the Senate in order to address the crowd. I was actually there. I was in there in person. The Congressman Bob Latta from Toledo area invited me as his guest, so I was in the gallery for the thing, and I heard a very powerful speech and a man asking for help from its closest ally to basically ensure that Iran doesn't get nuclear weapons. And we can talk about the Iran deal, what was great about it, what it did to the Jewish community. Like I've never seen anything in my entire life about it. It was the crack, I think, within the Jewish community that started separating us. We were very unified before the Iran deal, and then we got pressured into coming out for or against, et cetera, and that is another podcast that we can do.
Definitely. I'm going to have you on for that one.
Well, what I will say is that until we can reach across the aisle and say, as Jews, to say one thing that the opposite party has done in order to that helps the Jewish community, until we can actually recognize that and do that, then we're always going to be 70% Democrat and maybe 30% Republican, in the Jewish community here. And we are going to be continuously divided because, look, American values and Jewish values are very, very much aligned. Very much aligned, right? Democratic. That's why as Jews in America, we have such a problem with identity, right? We don't know if we're Jewish Americans or American Jews, right? What's the difference between a Jewish American and American Jew?
Yeah, exactly.
But we know what, but I believe that, Judaism is a nationality, right? I mean, I come from that standpoint. We have our own language, we have our own country, we have our own food, we have our own music. I believe that we're a nationality, right? And with that mind, that Jewish American Jew, like a lot of Americans, of Jewish Americans or American Jews, however you want to call them, have assimilated so much into America, the American society and their Jewish values is exactly the same. However, if you have it as American African or African American, is it Chinese American or American Chinese? Is it Japanese American or American Japanese? Right? You know what the difference between an Indian American and an American Indian is. Right.
Well, the thing about the
Chinese, we always have a problem about how do we identify, because either we have a huge identity crisis, and I think Jews have had an identity crisis ever since we came to America because we didn't know how to fit in, and then all of a sudden we felt accepted into America's society. And I think I would say 20 years ago, 30 years ago, maybe 40 years ago was really the height of American Jewishness in I would say American society of total acceptance, right? And now
I think I disagree with you on that, because there's still a lot of Jews today still feel like they're the other people. And
well, I think that's people because they have that little box inside them that says like it's fine for now, but when are they going to turn on us?
yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Well, you have to look at the rates of assimilation. If you ever relate to intermarriage, if you ever look at the rate of like just how Jews have been able to be on TV and news, involved in the newscasters and things like that, and as far as their Jewish identity, as far as Jews and what they bring from their own kind of Jewish ethics kind of way, whether or not they practice the religion. And what I mean by that they're ritualistic observers of light candles on a Friday night, keep kosher. I think that's for a lot of Jews in America, that's very irrelevant, right? But what they have is what I think is the Yiddish cup, which is the Yiddish soul, is the ability to question everything, right? 2 Jews, 3 opinions. They question authority. They question
5 opinions. 5.
Well, you have 5 opinions on one day, but like what we have is a deep desire to question even our text, right? The Gemara, the Torah, and the Mishnah. We're supposed to question and argue and wrestle, and we even add the minority opinion in our Jewish text for what the majority of the opinion states at the time when there was a ruling on something, because we believe that even the minority opinion has value to the entire discussion.
And I think on that note, I'm going to thank you very much for coming on, and I hope you'll come and do more podcasts with me. It's been a pleasure to have you, Joel. It's
been great. And if there's anyone who wants to get in contact, I'd love to do this in communities more.
Yes.
And if anyone needs any help with their nonprofit, just let me know. BexfordConsulting.com.
Okay. Thank you so much, Joel.
Welcome.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
What time will it be when war is no more? When bullets are melted and the warships moor.
This podcast is brought to you by Unbreakable Bindings Publishing Company. Executive produced by Lori Baldassi. Produced by Ryan Richardson. Hosted by Pam Goldstein.